You know, when someone goes through something traumatic, you sometimes hear them say things that they just stop you cold. It's like they're talking about a change so deep, it's not just a scar, it's like their whole story, the very story of who they are got completely rewritten. And that's exactly what we're going to dig into today.
Yeah, that sentence right there, I do not know myself anymore, it's just haunting, isn't it? And you hear it a lot from survivors. This isn't just about feeling down or a little off, no. This is something way deeper. It's this profound disconnection, like looking in the mirror and not recognizing the person looking back. You feel like a stranger in your own skin. And that feeling right there is the heart of what we're talking about. So to really get a grip on this, let's use a metaphor. Think about your identity, all your memories, your beliefs, what you stand for, as this big, completed jigsaw puzzle. It's a picture of you. Now imagine trauma is like someone just sweeping their arm across the table, sending all those pieces flying. It's a total mess. The pieces are all still there, technically, but they're scattered everywhere. And that coherent picture of who you are, it's just gone.
All right, so let's start by looking at what that actually feels like, this shattered sense of self. What's going on when that internal picture of who we are just feels like it's been smashed to bits? And look, it's so important to get this. That feeling of being a different person, of not recognizing yourself, that's not just in your head. It is a very real, core consequence of trauma. I mean, think about it. When the world around you suddenly stops making any sense, it's almost inevitable that you start to not make sense to yourself. And please hear this. This disconnection is not, and I repeat, not a sign of weakness. It's your brain doing the only thing it knows how to do, to cope with something completely overwhelming. Okay, so we've talked about the feeling, but what's actually happening under the hood? This is where it gets really fascinating, because we can literally look inside the brain to see the why behind it all. We're going to examine those scattered puzzle pieces, but from a neurological point of view. So, let me introduce you to something called the default mode network, or DMN for short. You can pretty much think of this as your brain's storyteller in chief. It's the network that kicks in when your mind wanders, when you're daydreaming, thinking about yesterday, or planning for tomorrow. It's constantly generating the me story. Basically, it's the physical home of your identity, right there in your brain.
Okay, so this is the absolute key. On a normal day, your DMN is just humming along, keeping your sense of self stable and coherent. But when trauma hits, the brain's alarm system, that primal fight or flight response, goes into overdrive and can essentially hijack the DMN. And the result of this? It's huge. The very part of your brain that tells you who you are is now tangled up with the part that screams danger. Your me story and your trauma story become one and the same. And it turns out when the trauma happens matters a lot. It's not a one-size-fits-all impact. If it happens when you're very young, it can mess with the basic wiring for stress and how you connect with people. If it hits during those crucial teenage years, it can totally derail the process of figuring out who you are. And even in adulthood, it can actually speed up disease and lead to isolation. It's like trauma finds the most vulnerable point in our development and hits us right there. So, let's recap. You've got these scattered pieces of yourself and a brain that's stuck on high alert. What does the mind do to try and make sense of this mess? Well, it does what our minds are built to do. It starts telling a story. The only problem is, sometimes that story becomes less of a comfort and more of a cage. And honestly, we all do this, all the time. It has a name. Psychologists call it our narrative identity. It's that running monologue in our heads that weaves together everything that's ever happened to us into a story that makes sense. It's the story of me. It's basically the glue that holds all those puzzle pieces together. But here's the catch. After trauma, that storytelling superpower can turn against us. The narrative can get, stuck. The traumatic event stops being just one chapter in a long book. It becomes the entire book. It overshadows everything. The story shifts from, I'm a person who went through something terrible to, I am a traumatized person. See the difference? It becomes the core identity. And this isn't just happening in a bubble. The real world often reinforces this story. Check out this number because it is absolutely staggering. Research shows that people who witness trauma end up experiencing nearly 3 times more traumatic events themselves. It's like trauma attracts more trauma. It creates this vicious feedback loop that just keeps confirming the story that the world is a dangerous place and that this is just who you are. And getting stuck in that story has real, measurable consequences.
The narrative you tell yourself literally changes your brain. We're talking about a 72% higher chance of mood disorders and a 78% jump for anxiety disorders, just from witnessing trauma. This isn't just about feeling bad. The story in our head is a powerful force with a direct line to our mental and physical health.
So this creates a huge internal conflict, right? A good way to understand it is to separate two things. On one hand, you have the subjective context. That's your story, your feelings, what it feels like to be you. On the other hand, you have the objective experience. That's what your brain is actually doing. The raw data, the neural wiring, the defense mechanisms firing away. The reason people feel so trapped is that the subjective story feels like 100% of reality, even when it's being driven by all this objective stuff happening completely out of sight.
Okay, but this is not where the story has to end. And this, to me, is the most important part of this whole conversation, the way forward. If the old puzzle is in a million pieces, how do you start building a new one? Let's talk about what healing actually looks like. This right here, this is the big idea. Healing isn't about forgetting, it's about reclaiming. It's about grabbing the pen back from the trauma and saying, I'm the author of this story now. You acknowledge that terrible chapter, of course, but you refuse to let it be the last one. And let's get something really straight. The point of healing is not to somehow go back to being the person you were before. That person, in a way, doesn't exist anymore. The real goal is integration. It's about building a new you that's strong enough to hold the trauma as just one part of your story, not the whole thing. People talk about bouncing back, but this is different. This is about bouncing forward. So, what does that actually look like? Well, it often breaks down into a few key steps. First, you have to create a coherent narrative. That means taking those chaotic, fragmented memories and weaving them into a story that has a beginning, a middle, and an end. It gives it a place. Second, you have to reclaim your agency. You start making choices, both big and small, that remind you that you are in control of your life. And third, you discover a new purpose. You find things you're passionate about that have absolutely nothing to do with the trauma. That's how you write the next chapter. Because in the end, yeah, the trauma might have shattered the old picture, but every single one of those pieces, they still belong to you. The power to pick them up, to rearrange them, to decide what new, stronger, more beautiful picture they're going to create, that power is still yours. So the only question left is, what new picture will you build?